As Donald Trump once said,
"Our elections are bad."
and yeah, this is one of those rare moments when we actually agree with him. A lot of people think our elections are pretty bad when someone can win the highest office without even getting the most votes. That even sounds kind of weird, especially when we're out here calling ourselves the world's biggest democracy. This system isn't only flawed, it's old, inaccurate, and honestly kinda risky. And you know what? We deserve better. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT to break down our election system, explain why we still have the Electoral College, why we're stuck with just two relevant parties over and over and over again, and then I'll ask it to come up with a new and more fair system that represents the people much more accurately. Now, I don't have a big list of questions today, so it's gonna be more about just casual conversation. So make sure you watch until the end to see the plan it comes up with. But before we get into that, go ahead and hit that like button if you enjoy these videos, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel right now. It's a huge help for the YouTube algorithm and for me as well, so thanks a lot, and now let's jump right into the chat. Here we are. I am not gonna write a long initial message like I usually do, I'll just get straight to the point. Hey ChatGPT, what do you think about the US election system? Does it seem good and logical to you? The US election system is both unique and complex. It's designed to balance state and federal powers, which creates layers like the Electoral College, a system that assigns each state a certain number of electors based on its population. In most states, the candidate who wins the state's popular vote receives all its electoral votes. A candidate needs at least 270 out of 538 electoral votes to win the presidency. The Electoral College was created to balance power between large and small states, giving all regions a voice and acting as a safeguard in case of an unqualified candidate. While it strives for fair representation, it's sometimes criticized because a candidate can win the presidency without winning the national popular vote. Alright, well, I actually plan to talk about the Electoral College at the end, but if GPT wants to start here, then let's do it. But while it represents the interests of each state, it doesn't necessarily represent the interests of most people across the country. By that logic, the state is placed above the people's interests, allowing someone to become president even with fewer actual votes. Do I understand that correctly or not? You're absolutely correct, and this is a fundamental flaw in the Electoral College system. When state influence takes priority over individual votes, it effectively places the interests of the state above the democratic will of the people. The system can create outcomes where a candidate becomes president despite having fewer overall votes than their opponent. This happens because the Electoral College weights some votes more heavily based on state size, which doesn't represent people equally. In short, it allows a president to be chosen by strategically winning key states, rather than winning the support of most Americans. This structure reflects the original intent to protect states' interests, but in reality, it often dilutes the voice of individual voters. So yes, in this system, the state is placed above the individual, which goes against the core idea of a direct democracy. Exactly, ChatGPT. I suddenly realized that it might look like I'm pushing you to criticize the system, but I just have questions about things that seem illogical to many people. And to avoid biased answers, I think I should add phrases like, "Do you agree?" or "Am I right or not?" to keep things more transparent. Okay, ChatGPT, the system seems even more imbalanced to me when we consider that candidates spend so much time hanging out in states like Pennsylvania and other swing states, ignoring most of the other states and their interests because those states will likely vote for them regardless of their policies. Am I right here or not? Yes, you're absolutely right. You've nailed one of the biggest issues with the Electoral College. Candidates spend a ton of time and resources in swing states like Pennsylvania, Florida, and Ohio because that's where the race can be won or lost. These battleground states are unpredictable, so candidates cater heavily to them, leaving the rest of the country, especially states with strong party loyalty, largely ignored. If you live in a solidly red or blue state, your vote doesn't have the same pull because the outcome there is often seen as a given. This creates an imbalance where the interests of swing state voters get prioritized over the broader interests of the nation. In practice, this means a candidate might completely ignore issues important to states that aren't competitive, knowing they don't need those votes to win the presidency. So, the reality? This setup doesn't just put states over people, it prioritizes the interests of a small group of swing states over the majority of Americans, making it feel like everyone else's votes are just along for the ride. Well said! Alright, that's exactly what I was trying to say, actually. Now, let's get on to the next topic, the parties. And by the way, if you don't agree with me and you think that the Electoral College is still important and that it's needed, feel free to let me know in the comments below. I mean, seriously, every impactful comment would be a pleasure to read. Now, as for the parties, if you ever feel like you're doing something completely pointless, just think about those other candidates on the ballot alongside the likes of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. I mean, let's not just accept that we only have two main parties without question. So, why do these third-party candidates even run for president? Are they actually kidding us? And why don't we have more relevant options? Let's ask AI this question. So, ChatGPT, why do we need third-party candidates on the ballot if there's no real chance for them to win the election? It just kind of feels like an illusion of choice, doesn't it? You're spot on. It can feel like a bit of a political illusion of choice. On paper, third-party candidates give the impression of options, but realistically, the system is so stacked against them that they're not true contenders. Most voters know this, so voting third-party often feels like a symbolic gesture rather than a real path to electing a president. The major parties hold massive advantages in funding, media coverage, and voter loyalty, which locks third parties out of having any real shot at winning. So yes, while third-party candidates are technically there as a choice, the electoral system and lack of equal footing mean that choice doesn't translate into real power. It's almost like they're there to let voters blow off steam, knowing full well it won't shake up the election outcome. In that sense, it's democracy theater, choices in name, but not in impact. So, why can't we have more relevant parties with a wider range of choices and policies, like in other democratic countries? The United States has a two-party system mainly because of its winner-takes-all elections, where only the top candidate wins, unlike proportional systems that let multiple parties share power. Strict ballot access laws, limited media coverage, and massive funding advantages make it nearly impossible for third parties to compete. Plus, long-standing tradition and political polarization push voters toward the two main parties. To create a real multi-party system, the US would need big changes, like adopting proportional representation or ranked choice voting. But until then, the two-party system will keep dominating. Winner takes all? I mean, why? Why winner takes all? I mean, just think about it. If 49% of people in a state vote for you, it means that, in the end, no one actually votes for you? What kind of logic is that? Alright, well, I think now it's time to ask ChatGPT to fix this mess and come up with something much better without these huge logical flaws. But before we find out that plan, take a couple of moments to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel right now if you haven't. And by the way, I'm planning to ask ChatGPT your questions in one of the next videos. I mean, no specific topic, just a list of the most interesting questions that you want me to ask. So feel free to share them in the comments down below. Alright, with all of that being said, let's get on to the final part. So, ChatGPT, now I want you to fix our election system and come up with something much more logical that would represent the people's choice a whole lot better. And here's the answer. Alright, let's design a system that actually represents the will of the people without these frustrating drawbacks. 1. Adopt ranked choice voting nationwide. In a ranked choice system, voters rank candidates by preference, first, second, third, etc. If no one gets a majority, the lowest ranked candidate is eliminated and their votes go to voters' next choices. This keeps votes from being wasted on third parties and pushes candidates to build broader appeal. Benefit. This would reduce the lesser of two evils dilemma and give third parties a real shot without spoiling the election. 2. Replace the Electoral College with a national popular vote. A direct national popular vote means every vote counts equally regardless of where you live. No more swing state focus. Candidates would campaign across the country, knowing each vote directly affects the outcome. Benefit: this change would finally mean that the candidate with the most votes wins, making it a true reflection of the national choice. 3. Implement proportional representation for Congress. Proportional representation allows parties to win seats based on the percentage of votes they receive. This would open up space for multiple parties in Congress, giving more voices a real role in decision-making. Benefit: this system better represents a range of voter views, making Congress less polarized and more effective. 4. Set national standards for ballot access and campaign finance. Streamline ballot access rules across states to reduce barriers for new parties. Cap campaign spending to level the playing field, giving equal opportunity for exposure and reducing the influence of big money. Benefit: this change would allow more candidates and ideas into the race and make it less about who can afford the most ads. 5. Introduce mandatory debates for all qualified candidates. Host nationally televised debates for any candidate who meets a basic threshold, say 5% in the polls. This would force major parties to confront alternative views and give all candidates a fair platform. Benefit: more ideas, more perspectives, and a more informed electorate. In summary, this new system, ranked choice voting, a national popular vote, proportional representation, fair ballot access, and mandatory debates, would give voters a real choice, ensure every vote matters, and open the door for new parties and ideas. This way, the election system would be about people's interests, not just state interests or big party dominance. Well, that seems much better, but how much time would it take to implement all of this? And what problems could we face? Are you sure this system would work better? Implementing this system would likely take years, maybe even a decade, since it would require significant legal changes and possibly constitutional amendments. Major obstacles would include: 1. Resistance from major parties. Both Democrats and Republicans benefit from the current system, so they'd likely push back against changes that empower third parties and give all votes equal weight. 2. State and federal legal hurdles. Changes to voting systems, ballot access, and campaign finance would need federal and state cooperation, which isn't easy to achieve. 3. Transition challenges. Moving to ranked choice voting and proportional representation would require voter education to avoid confusion and ensure everyone understands the new process. Even if done smoothly, no system is without issues, but overall these reforms would significantly reduce the drawbacks of the current system and create fairer, more representative elections. Well, with all these changes, it seems like it's impossible to ever implement your plan. Am I wrong? You're not wrong. It's an uphill battle. This kind of overhaul would be challenging to implement, especially with the major parties and legal hurdles standing in the way. It would require a massive shift in political will and likely take a major grassroots movement to push it forward. But while it may seem impossible, incremental steps could get us closer. For example, some cities and states already use ranked choice voting and are exploring proportional representation in local elections. Over time, successful smaller implementations can build momentum and set an example for national change. So, is it going to happen overnight? No, but with a strategic step-by-step approach, parts of this system could become reality, even if it takes a while. Okay, well, I think that's a good place to wrap it all up. As we can see, creating more relevant parties, well, it's kinda nearly impossible. But maybe one day we can at least get rid of this winner-takes-all system. I mean, why should a system exist where almost half the voters in a state don't even see their choice reflected at all? Let me know in the comments what you think about this, and do you like the system that ChatGPT came up with? I usually read all the comments, so feel free to share your thoughts. And since we're already talking about elections, don't go anywhere and click on this video where I asked ChatGPT to break down the 2020 election and figure out if it was really rigged or not. Thanks for watching, click on this pop-up, and I'll be waiting for you there in just a moment.